In this cyber safety lesson, we are going to explore safety practices and bring your own device, or BYOD policies. Our lesson objectives are to define what bring your own device, or BYOD, is in an organization, to examine the elements of a clear BYOD policy, to describe the role access control plays in BYOD, to review methods of providing data, software, and network security in a BYOD environment, and to describe the role that BYOD user training plays in an organization. Before starting this lesson, let's pause for just a second to give you time to think about how much you already know about BYOD policies. Remember, there's no wrong answer here. So what is BYOD? BYOD, or Bring Your Own Device, is a policy where employees can use personal gadgets like smartphones, tablets, or laptops for work rather than relying on devices the company provides. Some of the perks of this approach are that employees get the freedom to use devices they're already comfortable with. It makes it easier to work from almost anywhere, and it helps the company save on the cost of buying and maintaining devices. But there are challenges. One of the challenges with BYOD is that sensitive company info might end up on personal devices, which can be risky if those devices aren't secure enough. Also, there needs to be a clear policy on what's okay and what's not when it comes to using personal devices for work. Basically, the policy should set boundaries to make sure everything stays safe and professional. Now that we have established the need for a policy when companies allow and often encourage employees to use personal devices, we need to understand the elements that make up a clear BYOD policy. They include purpose and scope, eligibility and device requirements, data security and privacy, acceptable use, responsibilities and expectations, data ownership and access, compliance and legal considerations, support and maintenance, incident reporting and response, termination of access, disciplinary actions, and policy acknowledgement. Wow, that's a lot. As you can see, a good policy should be thorough and comprehensive. Now we'll look at each element individually for a better understanding. A BYOD policy should start by detailing the purpose and scope. The purpose of the BYOD policy is to clearly explain why the organization is going down this route, like offering more flexibility, saving on cost, and boosting productivity. It's also important to outline which devices are included in the policy, such as smartphones, tablets, or laptops, and whether it applies to everyone in the company or just certain teams or roles. When it comes to eligibility and device requirements, you'll want to say who can join the BYOD program, whether that's full-time employees, contractors, or specific departments. Plus, it's a good idea to set some guidelines for the devices themselves, like how old they can be, what operating system versions are required, and any security features needed like encryption to keep everything safe. The main purpose of data security and privacy is to make sure your personal and work information stays protected. This means setting up things like encryption to keep your data safe, the use of strong passwords to prevent unauthorized access, and two-factor authentication, or 2FA, for an extra layer of security. If your device gets lost or stolen, the policy should specify that the organization has the capability to erase any company data from the device. The policy should include guidelines about what systems, data, and apps you can access from your personal device. It should also include restrictions on what you can download and install. The policy should specify how you will go about making sure that company data stays separate from personal data, so the employee's privacy remains intact while still keeping everything work-related secure. The acceptable use portion of the policy should explain what's okay when you're using your personal device for work. It should cover things like which tasks or apps you can use for work purposes, such as email, VPN, cloud storage, and collaboration tools. It should also make clear how much personal use of your device is allowed during working hours. For example, personal use might be limited to breaks or lunch, just to keep things focused on work when you're on the clock. The responsibilities and expectations of both the employee and the company should be outlined. The policy should make it clear that it's your responsibility to keep your device secure. This means making sure software updates are installed and letting the company know right away if your device is lost or stolen. The policy should also explain what the company will do to support you, such as providing access to work systems, maintaining mobile device management software to keep things secure, and offering training to help you stay on top of security best practices. The policy should clarify that while you can access company data on your personal device, the organization still owns that data. Your personal data, on the other hand, remains yours. The policy should also outline what kind of access you have to company networks and systems. For example, some data may be restricted, like sensitive financial information, and access to that will be limited to only those who need it. As you can see, these BYOD policies are very comprehensive in nature. We've already covered a number of components that should be included, and we still have more that we need to talk about. Now we're turning to compliance and legal considerations. The policy should point out any legal or regulatory requirements like GDPR, and that stands for General Data Protection Regulation, or HIPAA, that you might already be familiar with, which protects health information. The policy should explain that the company can monitor your personal device to make sure everything is in line with the policy. And this can include things like checking the device's security status, tracking app installations, or monitoring access to company resources. When it comes to support and maintenance, the policy should explain what kind of IT support you'll get for your personal devices, like troubleshooting help, software updates, and help with configuration. It should also clarify whether the company will provide support for personal apps or if it's only for work-related ones. And the policy should outline whether you're responsible for covering the cost of maintaining and updating your device, like repairs or software licenses, or if the company will cover certain expenses. What about when something goes wrong? If something goes wrong, the policy should explain how to report a lost, stolen, or compromised device. It should outline the steps you need to take, such as notifying IT, locking the device, or wiping the data to keep everything secure. It should also include a process for letting the company know if there's a security breach, a data compromise, or really any suspicious activity, so that the company can act fast to address the issue. The policy should explain what happens when an employee leaves the company or is let go. This includes how their access to company data and systems will be revoked, and that any company data on their personal devices will be wiped. It should also specify when an employee's BYOD privileges might be taken away, like if they don't follow security protocols or they misuse their devices in some other way. The policy should explain what could happen if someone doesn't follow the BYOD rules. This might include things like restricted access to company systems, corrective training, or other consequences or disciplinary actions. And finally, policy acknowledgement. The policy should make it clear that employees need to sign an acknowledgement form saying they've read, understood, and agreed to follow the BYOD rules. It should also mention that the policy will be reviewed and updated from time to time, and that employees will be notified if there are any major changes. Now that we've covered all of the elements of a clear bring your own device policy, I hope you can see why having such a policy is important. Having a clear bring your own device policy is super important for companies because it helps set the right expectations around security, privacy, and productivity. When employees use their personal devices for work, it can obviously open up a lot of potential risk. Ultimately, having a clear policy ensures that employees can be productive with their personal devices while the company can still maintain control over its sensitive information. Now let's switch gears and talk about access control. Access control is a big deal in a BYOD policy because it helps make sure that only the right people have access to sensitive company data. When employees use their own devices, it can be harder to control who's getting into your systems, so you need to set up clear limits. By defining who can access what data, which systems they can use, and under what conditions, you're keeping everything secure. It also helps prevent unauthorized access. If someone else uses an employee's personal device, they shouldn't be able to get into company resources. With proper access control, you can limit things like access to financial data, customer information, or other sensitive details, ensuring only the right people can see or use it. Some of the things that help us accomplish access control are strong authentication, device management, data segregation, network restrictions, monitoring, and making sure that we are following the most current security standards. When it comes to a bring your own device policy, making sure everything is secure is super important to protect both personal and company data. There are three main areas to focus on when it comes to security: data security, software security, and network security. Now let's take just a few minutes to examine each of these in more detail. Let's start with data security. Data security is all about keeping sensitive information safe on personal devices. There are several ways that we can accomplish this. With data encryption, we make sure that the information is scrambled so no one can read it unless they're authorized, and this applies whether the data is saved on the device or is being sent over a network. Remote data wipe lets companies erase all the data from a lost or stolen device remotely. With data loss prevention, we can track and limit how sensitive information moves around so it doesn't end up in the wrong hands. Secure storage keeps company data separate from personal apps, and this makes it harder to leak or access the information without permission. And then access controls that we've already talked about make sure that only the right people can get to the sensitive data by using strong passwords and other user checks. Software security is about keeping the applications and systems on personal devices secure. One of the ways we can accomplish this is through the use of mobile device management software, or MDM. MDM is exactly what it sounds like. It allows administrators to easily manage mobile devices. They can use the software to apply policies, manage applications, and ensure that everything meets current security standards. We can also use whitelisting and blacklisting, where only approved applications are allowed on devices, and applications that are deemed risky can be blocked or restricted. We can accomplish software security through regular security patches and updates. We can also use antivirus and anti-malware software, and here again, we want to make sure that those are updated regularly. And finally, software security relies heavily on secure authentication when using applications. We want to make sure that we are requiring multi-factor authentication and strong passwords. Finally, let's look at network security. Network security is all about keeping devices safe while they're connected to the company network. Some key methods include VPNs or virtual private networks. They encrypt data to keep it secure when connecting to the network, especially over public Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi security makes sure devices only connect to trusted, password-protected networks and blocks open Wi-Fi unless you're using a VPN. Network access control restricts which devices can access the network, only allowing those that meet the standards. Intrusion detection systems monitor network traffic for any suspicious activity or attempts to breach the system. And firewalls are used on devices and at network entry points to block unauthorized access and protect against threats. Now that we have developed our Bring Your Own Device policy and it has been approved as necessary, we need to focus on user training. User training is super important in a Bring Your Own Device environment. Since employees use their personal devices to access company resources, training helps them understand their responsibilities and how to stay secure. It's one of the best ways to reduce security risk and to create a culture where everyone is aware of security best practices. If BYOD goes unmanaged, there are many potential risks. Some recent data has revealed that a significant gap exists between BYOD practice and the actual policies. 84% of organizations around the globe engage in bringing your own device, but only 52% of those have formal policies in place. Think about that for just a second. And alarmingly, 78% of IT professionals observe employees using personal devices even when it's against company policy. This lack of oversight contributes to a rise in mobile compromises, which has escalated from under 30% in 2018 to over 53% in 2024. I think these numbers make it clear that without proper management, BYOD can pose serious security risk. And take just a second to look at the chart over on the right. This chart shows the results of a survey that was conducted by BitGlass, and when asked for their main BYOD security concerns, 63% of respondents said data leakage, 53% said unauthorized access to data and systems, and 52% said malware infections. Now that you've reached the end of the lesson, let's pause again to give you time to think about how much you now know about BYOD policies. Congratulations, you have now completed this cyber safety lesson brought to you by the Nighthawk Cyber Alliance.